He's right there.
That's a big ass fish. That's a monster, Mike. Good job.
Double locked up, baby.
And that's why we're obviously outdoorsmen.
Ba-ba-bo.
And we are back again. Good morning, everyone. I am Mike with Obviously Outdoorsmen, and welcome to FLT number 22, First Light Talk number 22. And we are adding another segment to the Why It Worked series. And in this video and podcast, I am going to be talking about why this hunt on this 8.5-year-old New Jersey Monarch, why this hunt worked and how it panned out, everything that led up to it, all the history and everything else with him. But if this is your first time to Obviously Outdoorsman's podcast, please make sure you're following us and subscribe. I'd greatly appreciate it. And these First Light Talks come out every single morning at the same time between 6 and 8 a.m. every single day. And for these Why It Works series, I suggest looking at the video that comes out on YouTube. So if you guys are listening to the audio format on this one, I will try and make it as clear as possible if you guys cannot see any video. I will try and explain it as best as I can without showing any of the video with it. But if you guys are interested in the video, just head over to YouTube and check out the video. But why it worked. So this buck, this 8.5-year-old Monarch, this 8-pointer, I named Bruce. I had a couple years worth of pictures of him. I hunted this deer for 3 years in a row, and the first time we got him on camera, he was like 5.5 years old, I'd say. 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so he was 6 years old when we first got him on camera. And the day I killed him was just an eventful day to where I ended up skipping class. I was in college, and it was unnormally hot for that day. For that week, actually. I mean, it was, I believe, October, and I was wearing shorts in the stand the day before. It was just abnormally hot, so the action was kind of slow. When I went in the stand the day before, I hunted the afternoon, and when I checked the camera, he was in that morning making a scrape over one of my mock scrapes I had my camera on, and he was in at like 11 a.m. So the next day, when it was still hot as anything, and when I saw that it was going to be overcast instead of a nice sunny day, and overcast and maybe just a little bit of mist, I was like, yep, I'll be in the woods. And my plan was to get out there and just hunt all day long until the deer was dead. He was rutting up like crazy, so I knew it was going to be a good hunt. So I walk in there, and I hop in there with my bow, and I believe I'm wearing shorts again, but I'm not positive. But I walk in there, and I'm creeping all the way in. And I'm going down, and I put some Racketer Sense and Lures Climax on my feet, and I'm walking all the way down. I get all the way to my stand, and I don't have my bow release. And I'm like, well, that's kind of a necessity. So I hike all the way back out. Thank God I didn't leave my gear at the tree, because this whole hunt would not have panned out the way it did. All right, I hike all the way back to my truck, and I stop and get my bow release. And I go out to my truck, I get my release, and I start walking back in. And as I'm walking back in, the trail I walked to just walk in on, there's a little 3-pointer following up that trail from my tree stand back towards me. And I'm walking in there, and I'm just like, what the heck? No, that wasn't a 3-pointer. That was a little, like a button buck. So I'm just watching this button buck just mosey on about. And as I'm standing there, all I see are just like moose antlers coming through these tall reeds. And I'm like, there's Bruce. So I saw that he was battling it out with a 3-pointer. They were trying to chase some fawn around the woods. They were trying to breed them. Maybe they thought another doe was hot in the area. The amount of action that was on the trail cameras was incredible, so I knew they had their own does that were in heat. So when I mixed in that little bit of Climax, the hot doe urine from Racketer Sense, I just knew it was going to turn it on. But I didn't think it was going to happen that quick, to where I walk in, I walk out, and I go to walk back in, and they're already on the scent that I just walked in on. So I saw this big 8 coming in, and basically this was just like, I could do anything, and it may work and it may not. So these deer were so rutted up, all I literally did was just sit down behind a tree. I just got down and I got ready because this deer just came flying past me. This 8.5-year-old buck just came chugging on past me, chasing this 3-pointer through the woods, and the 3-pointer and him were chasing this fawn or doe around the woods. So the action's on, they're chasing, and it's just a matter of, is he going to run past me, or is he just going to go away from me, and do I go to my stand or do I stay here? So I made the choice of just staying put and hopefully bringing him back in. And basically, I didn't even have time to grab my grunt call or anything like that. I didn't even know what to do. I started bouncing from tree to tree, and I just started letting grunts out with my mouth, like just crappy sounding grunts, just like meh, meh. And I started getting louder, and they were so rutted up, they really didn't care about anything. But I don't know if it was luck of the draw or if I actually called these deer back in. Maybe I called the 3-pointer in, and the big buck followed him because he was just chasing him to beat the crap out of him. But I called this buck in, and that's where you see me first draw right here. And I draw back, and I realize the 8-pointer's not there. So I let down. And then as soon as that deer runs off, I realize there's another deer behind him, and the only other deer behind him is going to be the big 8. So I draw back, and I didn't even have to stop him. He stops just at like 12, 15 yards, and I just send it right through these tall like leaf trees and just center punched him. A perfect shot, and he went down in like 20 yards. So the moral behind this is just sometimes it's just in your favor. But I took a chance on reading the previous years and the previous weeks and days of weather patterns and this deer's behavior to be able to get to this point. And I studied him from year to year, and I unsuccessfully hunted him 2 years prior. And I learned his behaviors. I learned his behaviors and more and more and more. And he really didn't change at all throughout the next couple or the previous 2 years. He basically stayed the same. He just got heavy mass, and I think he actually like lost the point when this new year came on from the year before, because I have his shed from the year before. Well, he was a 9-pointer here, but he broke off 1 point here. So he was supposed to be a 9, but he's an 8 again here. So I was just learning him from year to year, and this deer was one of the biggest bodied bucks I've ever killed. He was over 200 pounds, and he's gray in the face. He's old as anything. He looks just like a moose in his face. And I just studied him. He was the boss of the woods, and he was beating the crap out of everything. The scars on the back of his neck were just immense. So whatever deer that has a curved rack that's wrapping around this guy's antlers and scarring him up and battling with him, I can only imagine what that buck looked like. But it's just the previous years and learning where he lived, where were his travel routes, and then just monitoring the woods on when a doe came in the heat or when the rut started going on. And there's a tree in this section of woods that is like probably 4 foot around. It is the biggest rub tree I've ever seen in here. Or no, I'll take that back. There are 2 trees in this certain section of woods, and they are the 2 biggest rubs I have ever seen in my life. One's about 4 foot around, and the other one's about 7 foot around or more. I don't even think I could have wrapped my hands around the one bigger tree. But if you look, this buck has a rack that'll fit around a tree that big. All he has to do is be pissed off and want to rub a tree, and he'll rub it. But surprisingly enough, for me, they were actually like community rub trees. So I had videos of a spike rubbing a 7 foot wide tree and just rubbing his face on it and just like stabbing the tree with his little spikes. And it's like, well, okay, so another deer roughed it up, and now it's becoming a community tree, and deer are just leaving their scent there. And on the smaller tree that was like 4 foot around, that one got hit by every single deer in the area. Bucks, does, rubbing their preorbital gland on it. I knew it was a hot spot. And I set up 3 or 4 cameras in this spot each year trying to get on this buck. And finally I was able to connect here, but I learned all the deer's behaviors and where they traveled, where they bedded, And when they left the woods to go during the winter months, when they left and when they came back the next year for early season and for the rut. And I knew when the rut would kick off each year based on just previous year's data and just waiting for a doe to go into heat. And they rut in this piece of wood so hard. It's just incredible. This is where the rut is just kicking off in here. I have heard bucks snort, wheeze, many different grunts in this section of woods. It's just amazing. So it's just a lot of scouting and just a lot of trail camera work, pre-game work. And in this hunt, it just took a bunch of luck because I did not expect just to walk on in, forget my release, obviously, walk back. And then when I came back to go sit for the entire day, because I sat, it was like 10, 11 in the morning. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to hunt until this deer comes in and I'm just going to hunt till dark. And I walked in and the buck's chasing and rutting and fighting. And I was like, okay, it's on a lot earlier than I thought. So I sat there, bounced from tree to tree, sent an arrow, got lucky in this scenario. I mean, I only take luck for granted so much, all right, because I don't really believe in luck that much. It's about chances and setting yourself up for success. And if you make a decision, then each decision and what happens to you after that is based off of that decision. It's not really luck. But in this case, all right, I made the decision to skip class, and luckily I made the right decision, and I went in there, and just it all came together very well. But this buck was just an amazing trophy for me. 8.5 years old. I believe it was a 132-inch 8-pointer, I want to say. I can't remember off the top of my head. I've been doing so many podcasts lately. 132-inch 8-pointer, I believe. 8.5 years old, just a massive old buck, just tree trunk antlers, right? And I'm sure in his prime, he was probably like a 140, 150 class buck. He had to be big. He was definitely on his way out, just getting smaller and smaller with the years goes on. But this just shows just being in the woods is better than not being in the woods. Sometimes sitting the stand on any day may be the wrong choice because of the wind and all the other possibilities in that, but just being in the woods, maybe just walking around, spotting and stalking depending on the wind, and just trying to make something happen. Maybe do a deer drive. It's always better to be in the woods than sitting on your couch, but make sure you're doing it the right way. If you got the wrong wind for a stand, don't sit that stand just because you want to be in the woods, because it's a very good possibility that you're just going to blow that spot up by sitting that stand on the wrong wind, and you may tip off the biggest buck of your life because you just wanted to be in the woods. So don't do that. But if you're going to be in the woods whenever you can be, do it the right way. Maybe it's just a scouting mission. Don't go in your tree stand. Maybe it's a deer drive. Maybe it's a spot and stalk if it's heavy wind or rainy or misty or whatever it may be. Just make sure you're doing it right. And sometimes luck comes all together and you have to be ready for it to happen at any moment, right? If I just had my bow hooked up on my backpack and I was just trucking through the woods and just trying to get to my stand to sit for 4, 5, 6 hours, then I wouldn't have been ready for the situation, all right? I walked in there, my bow was ready, and I looked up, here came this little deer. I knocked an arrow because I knew there were deer in the area. There came the big buck, and I'm like, okay, it's game time. I took my bag off, and I just got ready. Sometimes not moving versus following the animal is better. Just got to read the situation. And this is where I have made failures on trying to follow these types of deer in this type of situation, and I bust them. And in this case, I just stood my ground, and the deer worked its way back right past me to 15 yards, and I got the shot. So sometimes just patience is the key. And a lot of times that's the key. Just letting the deer play it out. Don't try and force something that can't be rushed. Right? If I followed them deer, maybe I kicked them out and I never would have got a shot, never would have saw them again. Right? I just kind of sat down. I was going to go sit my stand anyway, so I just sat behind the tree and I was going to wait like 10, 15 minutes. If they came back, awesome. If they didn't, I would have just walked off to my stand. And I just kind of sat there, stood still. Here came the deer, and it was game on. So just weigh your options and don't be too hasty with a decision. I know when a big buck is running past you full speed, then you have to make a quick decision, but just stop for a second and go, okay, if I stop here, maybe they'll come back to me. I'm already walking to my stand, so maybe if I just sit here for another 5 minutes, it won't hurt me. I mean, I just saw a big buck right here 30 seconds ago, so it's not a bad choice, right? But check the wind, check the time of the day. Is it going to get rainy at some point? Is it the rut? Is it based on food? Why are they doing what they're doing? Just think about it real quick. And so a lot of this hunt was scouting, a little bit of luck involved, and just being patient. That was one of the biggest things here. So in that case, guys, this is probably the shortest first light talk and why it worked segment yet, because in this hunt, I really didn't do anything special except make a shot and be patient. And I chose the right time of day and the right day to be in the woods because it was just rut action. Every deer in the woods were mouth open, drooling, chasing does, fighting it up, and they were just like stupid in the head because they had the does on the mind. That's all they cared about. They wanted the does, and they did not care what they interacted with, what happened to them. They were just like, I want the doe. That's all they want. So that's all it took for this hunt. I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast, this Why It Worked segment of my 8.5-year-old Jersey Monarch. And if you guys are watching this on YouTube, I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you are listening on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, anywhere you listen to the podcast, if you guys are listening to it there, please share this, rate us out of 5 stars. If you hate us, 1 star. If you like us, 5 star. Follow us, and you could always unfollow us later on down the road if you don't end up liking our podcast. You could always unfollow down the road, but please give us a follow. Please share this video or podcast, whatever platform you're on. Again, if you're on YouTube, just hit the share button, subscribe. You can always unsubscribe later, but I'd appreciate it if you stick around. We got big things coming and a ton of first light talks coming up as well. That is it, guys. I am Mike with Obviously Outdoorsman. Thanks for listening. Peace.